"Do sing for us, Lady Cecily," said the Countess of Broadmere, in a voice like honey poured over broken glass. "We have all heard how you practice. Surely one little song before the whole room is not too much to ask of a duke's sister." The Duke of Illingworth, across the crowded drawing-room, did not at first understand what was happening. He understood only that his sister had gone white. Cecily was 17 and painfully shy, and it had cost the Duke a season's worth of persuasion merely to bring her to London at all. She stood now at the center of a widening circle of the Countess's guests, a slight fair girl in a debutante's white, her music sheets crushed in her hands, and she was being asked, in that soft, cruel, public way that a certain kind of grand hostess had perfected, to perform alone before 200 sneering strangers, knowing full well that she could not, that her voice would fail, that she would humiliate herself and her name. It was a cat's game. The Countess of Broadmere had a daughter out this season, a daughter overshadowed by the arrival of a duke's sister, and this was her revenge, to break the little rival publicly and call it a compliment. Alaric no, Illingworth. Everyone called him Illingworth coldly as one names a weapon. The Duke of Illingworth was a hard man and knew it. He had a reputation for ruthlessness in the house, in business, at the card table, and had done nothing to soften it because a soft duke was a duke robbed, and he had a young sister and a great estate to guard and no wish to be robbed. He stood now against the wall and he saw the trap close around Cecily, and he felt the old cold rage stir, but he was too far across the room, hemmed by 50 bodies, and there was, he knew, no move he could make that would not make it worse. If the ruthless Duke of Illingworth strode across a drawing-room to rescue his sister from a song, the whole ton would laugh at her for a week. He was trapped by his own reputation. He could only watch his sister be broken and be helpless, for the first time in years, to prevent it. "Come, Lady Cecily," the Countess purred and the circle tittered. "You are keeping us all waiting." And then a voice said, clear and quite pleasant from somewhere near the pianoforte, "She would be glad to, Lady Broadmere, as soon as you have sung first." The room turned. The Duke of Illingworth turned with it and saw, rising from a chair by the instrument where she had plainly been sitting overlooked all evening, a young woman he did not know. She was not beautiful in the season's fashion, not fair and fragile like the debutantes, but dark and composed, in a gown 2 seasons old and a color that flattered no one, the unmistakable plumage of a wallflower, a girl who came to balls to fill a chair and be forgotten. He realized, walked past her twice that evening without seeing her. He was seeing her now. Everyone was. "I beg your pardon," said the Countess of Broadmere, in a tone that had frozen bolder creatures than a wallflower. "You asked Lady Cecily to sing before the room, without warning, without accompaniment, purely for the pleasure of the room," the young woman said, and she was smiling, a small firm smile, and her voice did not shake at all. "It is a charming custom. I only think it ought to begin with our hostess. You have a season's more polish than Lady Cecily, ma'am, and the room's affection besides, so you can have nothing to fear from it. Do sing first. Then Lady Cecily shall follow, and we shall all judge how the pupil compares to the mistress." She tilted her head pleasantly. "Unless the custom is meant only for girls too young and too kind to refuse, in which case it is not a custom at all, ma'am, but a cruelty, and I do not think a lady of your standing would wish 200 people to see her practice one." The silence that fell was total. The Duke of Illingworth stood against the wall and forgot for a moment to breathe. He watched the Countess of Broadmere's painted face go through fury, calculation, and finally, as she understood that she had been outmaneuvered completely, that she could not now sing without absurdity nor decline without confirming the accusation, that a nobody in a 2-season gown had turned her own weapon in her own hand before the whole of society. A stiff, defeated, brittle smile. "How droll," the Countess managed. "I did not know we had a wit among us tonight." And she turned and swept away, and the circle broke apart, and the cat's game was over, and Cecily, trembling, released, was drawn quietly out of the center of the room and into the shelter of a knot of kinder girls, unharmed. The Wallflower sat back down by the pianoforte as though nothing whatever had occurred, and picked up the fan she had set aside, and became, once more, invisible. But she was not invisible to the Duke of Illingworth. He crossed the room to her, And this time no one laughed, because there was nothing to laugh at. There was only a very tall, very hard man walking with a strange, arrested expression toward a girl in an unfashionable gown. "You defended my sister," he said. He was not a man who wasted words. The young woman looked up at him. Her eyes were dark and level and entirely unafraid, which almost no one's were in his experience when they looked up at him. "Someone had to, Your Grace," she said. "You could not, I saw. It would have made it worse for her, a duke charging to the rescue over a song. But no one troubles to watch a wallflower. It is the one advantage of the station. I could say what you could not." A faint, dry smile. "I have been overlooked at a great many balls, sir. This is the first time it has ever been the least bit useful." "Your name," said the Duke of Illingworth. He did not sleep well that night, which was itself remarkable, for the Duke of Illingworth slept the sound, dreamless sleep of a man who has long since stopped expecting the world to surprise him. But he lay awake in his townhouse, turning over the scene by the pianoforte, the Wallflower rising from her chair, the clear, pleasant voice turning the Countess's cruelty back upon her like a blade reversed, the way she had sat down afterward and picked up her fan and become invisible again, as though rescuing a duke's sister from public ruin were a small thing, a thing one did between dances and did not trouble to remember. He remembered it. He remembered every word of it. And in the morning, over his coffee, he found that his sister remembered it too, and rather more forcefully. "I should have died," Cecily said, appearing at the breakfast table before her usual hour, pale and earnest. "Alaric, I mean it. If that lady had not spoken, I should have had to stand there and open my mouth and no sound would have come out, and 200 people would have watched me fail, and I could never have shown my face in London again. I should have begged you to take me home to the country, and I should have stayed there all my life." She sat down across from him, twisting her napkin. "And she did not even know me. She had never spoken a word to me. She simply saw it was wrong and stopped it and took all the danger onto herself. The Countess will hate her now. Everyone saw. She spent her whole evening's safety on me, a stranger, and got nothing for it, and I did not even thank her properly. I was too frightened. I only let them lead me away." Her eyes filled. "I want to thank her. Will you find out who she is? Please, Alaric, will you?" "I know who she is," said the Duke. Cecily looked up. "Miss Harriet Vane," he said, "the eldest daughter of a country gentleman of small fortune and I gather considerable opinions. She has 3 younger sisters, no dowry to speak of, and a tongue that has made her enemies of every hostess in London, which is why she sits by the instrument and is not asked to dance." He turned his cup on its saucer. "I spoke with her afterward, briefly. She informed me that no one troubles to watch a wallflower, and that this was the one advantage of the station, as it allowed her to say what a duke charging across a room could not. She then advised me to go and see to my sister, and dismissed me, and picked up her fan." Cecily's mouth had fallen open. "She dismissed you, a duke?" "She dismissed me," said Illingworth, "as one dismisses a footman who is standing in the light. I have not been so handled since I was a boy." He was aware, saying it, that his voice held something it did not usually hold, and that his sister, sharp-eyed in the way of the young, had noticed it, and he added more coolly, "She is a woman of unusual quality in a room full of the usual. That is all. It is a pity the world has no use for her. The world is frequently a fool." But Cecily was not listening to the cool part. She was watching her brother's face with a dawning, delighted astonishment, for she had lived in the shadow of Illingworth's coldness all her life, and had never once heard him speak of a woman as anything but a nuisance to be managed or a fortune to be assessed. And here he was turning his coffee cup, and calling a penniless wallflower, a woman of unusual quality, with a particular expression she had no name for but recognized instantly as important. "You liked her," Cecily said. "I do not know her well enough to like her." "You liked her," his sister repeated with the pitiless certainty of 17. "You have that look. The tenants have it when the rain comes after a dry spell. Alaric, you liked her." The Duke of Illingworth did not answer his sister, which was, of course, an answer, and Cecily, wise beyond her shy years, said nothing more, but she resolved, over the marmalade, that she would find Miss Harriet Vane and thank her properly, and that she would contrive, by whatever fair means a newly emboldened 17-year-old could manage, to put her fierce, impossible brother in that lady's path as often as the London season allowed. She owed Miss Vane a debt. She had a notion that her brother owed her a larger one. And Cecily, who had spent the whole season being managed by everyone, discovered that she had rather a talent for managing back. The Duke, for his part, spent the following days telling himself that a sensible man did not reorder his life around a wallflower who had dismissed him beside a pianoforte, and finding, each day, that a sensible man was apparently not what he had turned out to be. "Harriet Vane, your grace," she said. "You will not have heard of me, few have. My father was a country gentleman of modest means and immodest opinions, and I have 3 younger sisters to be got off first and a small dowry to be divided 4 ways, which means in the arithmetic of this room that I am not worth a gentleman's crossing the floor. I sit by the instrument, I turn pages, I go home." She said all this without a scrap of self-pity, as one states a fact of natural history. "I am, in short, the last person you need trouble to thank, but I am glad your sister is safe. She has a kind face. It seemed a great pity to see it made sport of." The Duke of Illingworth looked down at Harriet Vane and found, to his considerable inconvenience, that he did not wish to walk away. He was not a man given to admiring people. He had spent 36 years learning that most people were either after his money or afraid of his temper, and that the safest course was to be feared a little more than one was pursued. He had never met, in all those years and all those glittering rooms, a person who was neither afraid of him nor after anything at all, who had simply seen a wrong being done, and had spent her own small store of social safety to right it, expecting nothing, and had then sat down and picked up her fan. It was, he thought, the most genuinely aristocratic thing he had ever witnessed, and it had been done by a girl the aristocracy did not trouble to see. "You are wrong," he said, "about one thing, Miss Vane." "I am frequently wrong, your grace. About which thing in particular?" "That you are not worth a gentleman's crossing the floor." He heard himself say it and did not take it back. "I have crossed it, and I find I am disinclined to cross back." Something flickered in the dark level eyes. Surprise quickly mastered. "That is very handsome, sir, but you are grateful, which is a kind of drunkenness, and it will pass by morning, and you will not remember my name, and that is quite as it should be. Do go and see to your sister. She will want you." He went to see to his sister, but he remembered her name. He remembered it the next morning and the morning after. He found himself, over the following fortnight, doing things entirely out of character for the ruthless Duke of Illingworth. He inquired, discreetly, into the Vane family, and confirmed everything she had told him and rather more, that Sir Marcus Vane was a good, improvident man, that Harriet was the eldest and had quietly become the manager of a struggling household at 19, and had given up her own prospects without a word of complaint to see her sisters have theirs. That she was clever and read Greek her father had taught her, and had a tongue that had made her enemies among the mothers of the ton, which was precisely why she sat by the instrument. He found himself contriving to be at the same 3 balls she attended. He found himself, God help him, seeking out the neighborhood of the pianoforte. Cecily, who adored her fierce brother and had never once seen him seek anyone out, watched all this with widening eyes and eventually took matters into her own newly emboldened hands. It was Cecily who insisted Miss Vane be invited to the small musical evening at Illingworth House, Cecily who sat Miss Vane beside her at supper, Cecily who said in the carriage afterward, with a 17-year-old's fatal directness, "You like her, Alaric. You have never liked anyone. You look at her the way the tenants look at rain after a drought." "I hardly know her," said the Duke. "You know her better than you know most people you have met 100 times," said his sister, "because she is the only person who has ever spoken to you as though you were a man and not a duke. I notice everything now. You taught me to this season, you and Miss Vane between you." She looked out the carriage window. "She saved me, Alaric, standing up before the whole horrid room in her old gown with everyone ready to turn on her instead. She did not have to. No one made her. She did it because it was right, and then she sat down and expected nothing." A pause. "I should like a sister like that, if you were wondering." The Duke of Illingworth was quiet the rest of the way home. He was, in fact, wondering. He had been wondering for a fortnight. He was a practical man, and he laid the matter before himself practically. Harriet Vane brought him no fortune, no great connection, nothing the world reckoned valuable in a duchess. The ton would be astonished. The mothers whose daughters he had ignored for years would be venomous. The Countess of Broadmere would very likely have an apoplexy. Set against this was the plain fact that he had not, in 36 years, met another human being in whose company the cold weight he carried everywhere grew lighter, that Harriet Vane made him want to be not more feared but more worthy, which was a thing no one had ever made him want, and that when he imagined the long gray corridor of his future without her in it, the imagining was unendurable. Put that way, it was not, he found, a difficult sum at all. But there was the matter of her pride, which was considerable, and her conviction that his interest was mere gratitude, which was maddening, and her habit of turning aside every warmth he offered with a dry deflection, as a woman does who has been taught by long experience that warmth offered to a wallflower is either a mistake or a joke. He would have to be careful. He would have to make her believe it, which meant he would have to do a thing the ruthless Duke of Illingworth had never once done in his life. Lower his guard entirely in the open and give her the power to wound him and trust her not to use it. He found, thinking of Harriet Vane rising from her chair by the pianoforte, that he trusted her not to use it more than he had ever trusted anyone. The musical evening at Illingworth House was Cecily's doing, and the Duke knew it and permitted it, which told him more about the state of his own heart than he cared to examine. It was a small affair by the standards of the season, 36 guests, a hired quartet, his aunt to lend it countenance, and Miss Harriet Vane was on the list because Cecily had put her there, and had looked at her brother with such transparent hope that he had not had the heart, or perhaps the wish, to strike the name. Harriet came in the same unfashionable gown, or its sister, and took, from long habit, the chair nearest the instrument and farthest from notice. And the Duke of Illingworth, who had spent the whole of the preceding week arranging not to think about her, spent the whole of the evening arranging to be wherever she was. He found her, at length, a little apart from the company, by a window, examining a small bronze on a side table with the frank interest of a woman who assumed no one was watching her. He came and stood beside her. "It is a Roman copy," he said, "of a Greek original that is lost. My grandfather bought it in Italy and was cheated on the price, which he never discovered, and which I have never had the heart to tell his portrait." Harriet did not startle. She glanced up at him, and there was the dry gleam he was coming to look for. "It is a very fine cheat, then. The drapery is beautiful." She set it down. "You need not entertain me, your grace. I am perfectly content by the window. It is my natural habitat. I should feel quite lost in the middle of a room, like a fish set down on a lawn." "I find," said the Duke, "that I am not entertaining you as a duty. I am standing here because it is the only corner of the room I have any wish to be in. You will find that inconvenient, I expect. You have made it very plain that you regard a duke's attention as a passing weather, to be waited out." "I regard it," Harriet said, "as a thing that cannot come to any good for a woman in my position, whatever its sincerity, and so is better not encouraged. You are grateful to me for your sister. Gratitude is warm and generous and entirely genuine, and it fades, your grace, exactly as the memory of the fright fades, and then you will look back and be a little embarrassed to have singled out the wallflower, and you will be more careful in future, and I shall be where I was, only rather more talked about. I have seen it happen to cleverer women, then I would rather skip to the end and spare us both." The Duke of Illingworth looked at her for a long moment. He was not accustomed to being read so accurately, nor to being refused before he had offered anything, nor to the peculiar, bracing pleasure of talking with a person who was not the least afraid of him and did not want anything he had. "You have decided," he said slowly, "that the most likely story is the one where I disappoint you, and you have decided it in advance so that when it comes you will not be hurt by it. I know the maneuver, Miss Vane. I have used it all my life. It is how a person protects themselves who has learned to expect very little. One expects the little out loud in advance, so that the disappointment when it comes arrives already tamed." He paused. "But you have made one error in your reckoning. You have assumed I am the kind of man who tires of things. I am not. I am the kind of man who, having once found a thing genuinely worth his attention, becomes tediously, immovably fixed upon it to the despair of everyone around me. Ask my man of business. Ask my sister. I do not fade, Miss Vane. It is very nearly the worst thing about me." Something flickered across Harriet's face, the smallest crack in the armor quickly mortared over. "That is a very pretty speech," she said, but her voice was not quite as dry as before. "You have clearly given the matter thought." "I have given it a great deal of thought," said the Duke. "It has ruined a perfectly good week." And to his considerable satisfaction, Harriet Vane, who had answers for everything, who had never once, that he had observed, been caught without a word ready, colored faintly, and looked back at the little bronze and said nothing at all. Across the room, Cecily Illingworth watched her brother stand talking to a wallflower by a window for the better part of an hour, ignoring 3 heiresses and a marchioness's daughter, and the aunt who was trying to signal him to circulate. And she smiled to herself, and turned the pages for the quartet with a light heart, and thought that the season had turned out very much better than a frightened girl in white had any right to hope for herself, and she rather suspected for her impossible brother too. He came to call at the modest Vane house in an unfashionable street, in his own person, unannounced, which set the household into a panic that Harriet met with characteristic composure, receiving him in a small shabby parlor with her chin up and her hands folded, and her 3 younger sisters visibly listening through the door. "You have made a mistake in your direction, Your Grace," she said. "There is nothing in this street worth a duke's carriage." "I have made no mistake," said the Duke of Illingworth, and remained standing because she had not asked him to sit, and because he found his heart was beating like a boy's. "Miss Vane, I am going to say a number of things now, and I beg you will not deflect them, though I know it is your habit and your armor, because I have taken a great deal of trouble to arrange the courage to say them, and I am not sure I can arrange it twice." Harriet's dry retort died on her lips. She looked at him, and something in his face, some plainness, some undefended thing she had never seen in a great man, made her go quiet. "When you rose from your chair to defend my sister," he said, "you spent the only coin you had your safety in that room on a girl who was nothing to you, and you asked for nothing back, and then you told me my interest was mere gratitude and would pass by morning. It has not passed. It has done nothing but grow, every morning, for 6 weeks. I have inquired into your circumstances, which was ungentlemanly, and I am not sorry. I know what you gave up for your sisters. I know why you sit by the instrument. I know that the ton overlooks you, and I know now that this is not a judgment upon you but a judgment upon the ton, which cannot tell the difference between a woman worth nothing and a woman it has failed to deserve." He drew a breath. "I am the second kind of fool. I walked past you twice that first evening and did not see you. I have been walking past the thing I most want my whole life, seeing only what glittered. You do not glitter, Miss Vane, you burn. There is a difference, and I have only lately learned to tell it, and I learned it from you." Harriet Vane had gone very still, and her level dark eyes were, for the first time in his acquaintance, not level at all. "You will say it is gratitude," the Duke went on, "or a duke's whim or a mistake I shall regret. So let me forestall you. I have thought of nothing else for 6 weeks. I have weighed it as coldly as I weigh everything, and I tell you the sum comes out the same however I turn it. I do not wish to spend my life in rooms where you are not. I would rather be a better man in your company than a feared one in anyone else's. My sister loves you." I and here the ruthless Duke of Illingworth, who had never in his life said the word to a living soul, said it quietly in a shabby parlor with 3 sisters listening at the door. "I love you, Harriet. Not out of gratitude, out of clear sight at last. Marry me. Not for the coronet, which I know you care nothing for the man who has crossed the floor and is disinclined to cross back, and never shall be all his life unless you send him." There was a small crash from behind the parlor door, as of a younger sister who had been leaning too hard upon it. Harriet did not laugh. Her armor had failed her entirely, her eyes were bright, and when she spoke her voice for once was not dry at all. "You are a very great fool, Your Grace," she said unsteadily, "to offer a coronet to a girl who told you to your face she was not worth crossing a floor for." "I have never been more certain of a purchase in my life," said the Duke, "and I am reckoned a shrewd man of business. My dowry is a quarter of nothing. My tongue has made me enemies of every hostess in London. The Countess of Broadmere will." "The Countess of Broadmere," said Illingworth, "will attend our wedding and smile and choke on it, and it will be the finest entertainment the ton has enjoyed in a decade." Stop reckoning the cost, Harriet. That is my role, and I have done the sum, and the answer is you. Only say yes and let me sit down, for I have been standing this quarter hour and my knees are less certain than my heart. And Harriet Vane, who had given up her prospects for her sisters and sat by the instrument for 3 seasons, and risen just once to defend a frightened girl expecting to be forgotten for it, put her folded hands into the hands of the Duke of Illingworth and said, "Yes, you maddening man, sit down. Yes." They were married before the season was out, and the Tun, which loves nothing so much as a story it did not predict, made the match the sensation of the year. The Duke of Illingworth, feared for his coldness, was seen to laugh in public more than once, and always at something his wife had said. The new Duchess proved a formidable hostess in her turn. Not cruel, never cruel, she had felt the edge of cruelty too keenly for that, but sharp enough that the mothers who had overlooked her learned very quickly to court her instead. And the Countess of Broadmere did indeed attend the wedding, and did smile, and did choke on it, and never fully recovered her position. For society had marked which way the wind blew, and the wind blew from Illingworth House. But the truest triumph was quieter. Cecily bloomed under her new sister's wing as she had never bloomed before. She made her curtsy at court the following spring composed and unafraid, and married, 3 years on, a man who deserved her, with Harriet weeping in the front pew and the Duke gripping his wife's hand very hard and pretending he was not. And Harriet's 3 younger sisters, whose prospects she had sacrificed her own to secure, found themselves suddenly the sisters-in-law of a duke, dowered and connected and courted, every one of them settled handsomely within a few short years, so that the great gift Harriet had given quietly and expecting nothing came back to her 100-fold, as such gifts sometimes, in a just accounting, do. "You told me," the Duke of Illingworth said to her once, years on, at a ball, watching her hold a whole circle wrapped where once she had turned its pages, "that being overlooked was the one advantage of your station, that no one troubles to watch a wallflower." "I did," she said, tapping his arm with her fan, "and it was true and it saved your sister. What of it?" "Only that I have resolved," said the Duke, drawing her hand through his arm and turning her toward the dancing, "to spend the remainder of my life ensuring you are never, for one single moment, overlooked again." He looked down at her, and the cold weight he had carried into every room for 36 years was nowhere to be found. "It is a great deal of watching, Harriet. I mean to be very thorough." "You always are," said the Duchess of Illingworth, and let the man who burned for her lead her out to dance. In the center of the room she had once sat at the edge of, in full and glittering view of everyone.